Sorry about that. Okay. So I was saying, for years, enterprises have struggled to decide whether they should choose an open source software like ERPNext or any other proprietary software. Now, this critical business decision impacts the organization immensely, as the chosen software will host mission critical applications on it. So enterprises need to consider long-term implications before choosing any software. However, the good news is that 60% of the businesses have reported that they have increased the use of open source software in the previous year. If you look at the slide, it's a survey conducted by NSS Labs, right? And the trend of adopting open source software is growing exponentially every year. Now, there are three major reasons why enterprises should have open source software as the main focus. First is performance. Now, more than 50% of the enterprises have reported a decrease in hardware costs, while 50% of them have reported an increase in performance when they adopt an ERP system which is open source. Security is the second most important aspect. In the survey conducted by NSS Labs, 94% of the respondents claim that open source software is secure, adding that their security teams are faster and more effective at dealing with cybersecurity attacks and breaches. Now, third and most important, I believe, is the application performance. Applications powered by open source software have shown a better performance across the board. In the same survey that you're looking at on your screens, 44% of the respondents have said that open source software is the best platform for most applications. Now, powered by the Frappe framework, ERPNext provides solutions that offer a variety of benefits: high quality source code, stability, performance, and a high level of security. Our community is our strength, and they ensure ongoing development and promote a high level of innovation. With ERPNext, the source code of the software is fully accessible. This allows a high degree of flexibility for individual adaptations. Now, my colleagues, Sagar and Faraz, will elaborate more on why ERPNext is the preferred choice for enterprise customers. Thank you.
Thanks, Kundendu. So why ERPNext? What makes us different? Of course, the reasons are on your screen. Let us explain them. Firstly, why should someone pay for yearly cost, which include user licenses, developer licenses, upgrade costs, and other hidden costs? Closed source ERPs are often rigid and unscalable. The total cost of ownership is excessively high. Open source software guarantees a low cost of ownership from the outset. And you don't have to shell big bucks. It provides a better return on investment in the longer run as well. Transparency is the most important factor. There's no secret sauce for a perfect implementation of an ERP. Transparency is the key for a sustainable solution. Data today is no less than gold dust. With open source, you own your own data and are not beholden to the vendor. Frappe framework is a real superhero, or I could say a superpower, which gives you absolute flexibility in terms of solutioning and scale.
Moving forward, as you see, there are two main types of sales: complex sales, which we call as enterprise, and transaction sales, which is SMB. Most people are very familiar with transaction sales. They are the everyday, straightforward buying and selling of your products and services to an individual or small group of individuals. For the most part, these type of transactions are low risk with a short sales cycle. These sales cycles typically have sales of about 60 days or even less than that, and relatively very few touches or only one touch. In contrast, enterprise sales represent months of engagement between the account executive and the prospect, resulting in sales cycles for up to 3 to 6 months. Now, enterprise differs from SMB in the following way. As you see, Number one is your decision making and change management. For an enterprise, there is a lot of navigation throughout the internal organizations that are key and multiple approval process. Typically, an SMB will have a faster decision making process. Moving forward, the most important part is the process. SMB are constantly evolving as they grow. And in enterprise, while having agility, they will likely to have all the set processes in place. And if not, they will fall onto us to help them to devise useful processes. The other part, or the most important part here, what differentiates from an enterprise with an SMB is the complexity. With the higher investment comes higher risk and greater complexity. The account executive must balance the needs of the organization with the capabilities of the product or the services that you offer to an enterprise to deliver a customizable solution to them. Lastly, is the scalability. Enterprise will be looking to buy for the long term and will need an effective and efficient solution involving most of the times high volumes of data and transactions.
Now that we have understood what differentiates an enterprise from an SMB, let's have a look at the types of personas we often come across when it comes to an enterprise project. Firstly, we have the economic buyers. This consists of mainly the CXOs, including the VPs, the CFOs, the CIOs, the CTOs, generally the decision makers or the signing authorities. They look at the impact of the purchase in the longer run. Secondly, we have technical buyers. This consists of mid-level managers who act as influencers, and they have some amount of sway in the buying process. Their job is to identify key pain points. Last but not the least, we have the end users, people doing day-to-day activities or possibly spending most of the time on the system application. Their consistence often holds a key vote in the decision-making process. The key is to identify these personas and make an appropriate pitch to them.
Now, let's see what will an enterprise look from a vendor. So the most important part again here is the critical support. Enterprises pride in good customer support, having dedicated support team, members based on the expertise. I mean, the support team members should be based on the expertise and a dedicated account manager. The other most critical part here is the compliances. I'm not talking about just the external compliances, such as your taxation. I mean, you're taxing about all the countries, your auditing, but also it comes into the picture of your vendor compliances, the OEM compliances, such as when the account is live, what are the security measures that you can take place? What are the data protection policies that you have? Other than that, the most important part again comes into the picture is the expertise. Have you ever solved this kind of problem or very similar problem before? If not, do you have the right capabilities or do you have the right expertise that can help them to solve their key points or the key papers? And finally, how do you plan and execute? As with the decision making for the enterprises, enterprises expecting a very clear plan of action to move forward. Now, my colleague Kenneth will take over and help you explain what are the customers case studies that we have gone through from last 6 months.
Right. So as Faraz mentioned, we look at two case studies or two incidences of dealing with enterprises over at Frappe Technologies in the past 1 year, right? The first one, this is a retail giant based in India, valued easily over $1 billion. Yes, you heard that right, the big P. Now, internally, they were using one of your most common big name licenses software out there, right? And they also provide some services to their partners. Imagine like, processing invoices for them on a day-to-day basis. Now, this company is processing upwards of 100K invoices per day. How does it achieve this? Excel uploads. In 2021, these guys were still using Excel to manually upload over 100,000 invoices per day into their current ERP. Of course, this process was no more scalable because now most of your workforce's time is going into making sure the Excel sheets are filled in the right template and are being uploaded into the system correctly. And then you have the time to check the financials. This is where Frappe stepped in, and this is how we helped out this customer. Right. So on the screen, we just talked about the pain points for the customer. That's your first layer of the slide. The second layer represents what tool set Frappe, both as a framework and a company, walked in with to this customer. And finally, here are the outcomes, how we could help them achieve some of their goals. First of all, excellent consulting. Our consultants were able to quickly understand their needs, map their current processes into ERPNext, and help them onboard quickly. Frappe Cloud provided the necessary infra over here to scale to process over 100K invoices. Out of the box APIs meant that we could directly import invoices from the client's POS system, right? No more Excel uploads, no more manual processing, no more manual intervention over here. Now, for the old timers, right? Those who have been working with ERPNext for quite some time, you know that bottlenecks, especially when processing large amount of data, was a bottleneck with ERPNext. So as you expected, this was also something that we faced in this implementation as well. That's where the engineering team stepped in. They looked at the incoming data, looked at some processes we could apply, and there we go. We included some parallel processes, made sure jobs are queued in batch, and this is how to date we were able to process upwards of 140,000 invoices per day for 5 companies within ERPNext. Now that ERPNext has been battle tested, its scale has been tested well. This particular client is looking now to onboard more use cases onto ERPNext with each preceding day. We now move on to our second case study. Now, this is more on the side of the sales cycle. This is a story of how, let's say Frappe won over some incumbent players in the market for this deal. So here we were dealing with an audio company, right? It is one of India's fastest growing consumer retail companies out there. Now, as you expect with a typical growing company, right? They'll have a SaaS solution over here and there for inventory management, HR, and some other use cases. They'd, of course, be using something like a Tally or QuickBooks, right? The most common accounting software is out there. And finally, whatever else remains, no SaaS solution, just use Excel. These are the pain points we were dealing with for this client. And now, as you expect in any organization, if your data is distributed over 100 places, you do not have insights. You can't say how many earphones or how many cables you can manufacture. You do not have a count of your inventory there, right? All of these have to be updated day in, day out. There are a lot of mistakes. You don't know when your purchases are flowing in. That's what we were looking out to solve over here for this client. And of course, like I said, right, we were pitted against our legacy players again in the market. How did Frappe win them over? Of course, we provided a one-stop solution with ERPNext. Very robust, could very quickly map the use cases with our vanilla software. And there we go, base use cases solved. Wherever the client had particular use cases not mapped directly into ERPNext, we were able to use the framework to mold the system and give it shape, right? And most of these things we were able to do via the UI. Again, we were able to showcase the value of the product, the flexibility to the client itself. Ultimately, seeing is believing. What we were able to also showcase was how a typical user's day would look when they're using the software. This means when an account team logs in, what kind of accounting data they would need. Somebody from the management logs in, what kind of reports they'd be looking at. If a manufacturing team logs in, what are their open work orders, right? We were able to tailor this demo instance as per their processes. And this was a direct feedback from the client, what I'm going to say next. He said that, maybe your competitors didn't understand my processes very, very seriously. They just ended up showing us some kind of a generic demo. That's where, we as a solution provider were able to win them over with the right tool set, customizing the instance to their particular need, and showing that what ERPNext could look like on a day-to-day basis.
Great. So this concludes our part of the presentation today. Thank you for your presence, and let's meet our sponsors again.
Thank you so much, Faraz, Sagar, Kenneth, and Kundendu. That's definitely a very informative talk.